I've worked with this really great powerlifting coach for the last couple months, and it's been great. My programming's been more dialed in. I've had somebody who can pay attention to, all the little mistakes that I'm making that I would otherwise overlook. And I've made progress, and that's been nice. But after training for a decade now, what I've realized is that the biggest thing is just get in the gym and don't miss reps. Put your reps in. If you do that, then the actual program that you're on, it might help you a little bit in the short run. And maybe if it's really dialed in, you got a great coach, then it could help you in the long run too, a little bit. Maybe your peak would be a little higher. But if you just put your reps in and don't miss workouts, and you do that for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, I don't know, how far would you get as long as you're doing a reasonable program? Probably pretty far. Even if you don't have the best coach, you probably get 95% of your potential out. And I think a lot of times, this is true not just for habits, but like any kind of endeavor that people go into, they try to optimize the things that make like the last 2% of difference. Like people want to get in shape and they're like, what knee sleeves do I need? What's the best protein powder? What workout shoes should I buy? What running
Olympic shoes should I
right?
wear?
Yeah. And it's like, dude, just don't miss workouts for 2 years and then get back to me. That's the thing that makes 98% of the difference is, are you putting your reps in?
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, James Clear, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, get clarity.
The process of change usually starts with self-awareness. Now, you can change without being aware of it, but you're not usually in control. It means that the environment shifted or the circumstance or situation changed and you changed in response, but you weren't really influencing it in any meaningful way. So it starts with self-awareness. Then the next step, which you already mentioned, is we could call it different things, call it deliberate practice, call it routine, or whatever, but you're consciously doing the behavior. So you're putting an effort to practice it.
Just to stop you there, is there any tricks, that you have found as far as that part of it, because people don't get started, they have too high of goals. I've heard a ton of different ones, but
sure.
Could you share with us, some tips on that part of it?
So I think there are a couple, maybe two, let's pick two strategies that you could use right away. So the first one is a lot of people feel like they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. And what I mean by that is they think, I need more willpower, I need more motivation, I need more persistence, I need more drive. And certainly, those are all important qualities in life. But the truth is we often make statements about how we want to change in very vague ways. We say something like, this time it'll be different, I'll just eat better, I'm going to try harder, whatever. And instead, if we have clarity, and you could use, there are two strategies in the book that I talk about for this. One is implementation intentions. So it is an intention to implement a particular behavior. So the simplest way to do this is you fill out a sentence that says exactly when and where the behavior will occur. So I will go to the gym on Monday at 5 p.m. at this address, or I will journal at this coffee shop at 6 a.m., blah, blah, blah. And the more clear that plan is, the more likely you are to follow through. And there's a bunch of research studies that show that people are more likely to get their flu shot, quit smoking, recycle, exercise, basically any kind of habit you can think of.
Rule number 3, hack your process.
I divide a habit into 4 different stages. And so just from a high level, those stages are cue, craving, response, and reward. So the cue is something that gets your attention, like you see a plate of cookies on the counter, that's a visual cue. Or the ambulance comes behind you on the street and you hear it, and so you pull to the side of the road, like that's an auditory cue. Or your phone buzzes in your pocket, that's like a physical or tactile cue. And so it can be any of the senses, but usually it tends to be visual. Humans are very visual creatures, so that tends to be the most predominant sense. But the cue gets your attention. The second step is the craving, which is dependent on how you interpret the cue. So whether you get a craving or the motivation to act, whether you predict that it would be useful to take a response, depends on the meaning that you assign to the cue. So if you have 2 people who walk into a living room and they see a pack of cigarettes sitting on the table, the first person might, they've been a smoker for 10 years and they see it and they get this craving of, I want to pick a cigarette up and smoke. So they interpret that visual cue as favorable. The second person has never smoked a day in their life, and so they see the cigarettes and they just think, it's just a pack of cigarettes, and they move on. And so it's really about the meaning that you assign to that visual cue that determines whether you act on it or not. Then there's the response. And finally, the response is the actual habit or action itself. And then finally, there's the reward or the outcome. So visual cue, you see a plate of cookies on the counter. Craving, you interpret them as favorable. You predict, oh, that'll be sweet, sugary, tasty. So you response, grab one, take a bite. And then finally, the reward. And the reward serves two purposes. The first is it satisfies the craving that came before the action. So you predicted that the cookie would be tasty and sweet. And once you take a bite, it is in fact sugary, tasty, sweet. So that resolves that craving. And then the second thing that it does is it teaches your brain what to repeat for next time. Because when actions are followed by a feeling of pleasure, when it's enjoyable or you solved the problem you were facing or you had some kind of successful feeling at the end of the habit, it feels good. And your brain's like, hey, that was enjoyable. I should do this again next time when I'm in a similar circumstance. And so it's actually closing the feedback loop and training your brain what to do again and again. And once you've done something enough times and gotten the outcome that you hoped from it again and again and again, the feedback loop gets really tight and you can do it pretty much on autopilot. You don't even really think about it. You're just sort of automatically, whenever you put a shoe on and see a shoe untied on your foot, that's the cue. And you know, oh, I just go ahead and tie the shoe. And that's how I get this reward that I'm looking for of having a shoe securely on my foot and so on.
Rule number 4, lower the bar.
The reason a lot of people struggle with that conscious activity is that they pick things that are too big in the beginning.
Right. So I call lower the bar.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the 2-minute rule helps you lower the bar by saying a new habit is something that should take less than 2 minutes to do. So you take whatever habit you're trying to build, whatever ambitious plan you have, read 40 books a year becomes read 1 page, or do yoga 4 days a week becomes take out my yoga mat. And sometimes people resist this a little bit when I say it first because they think, all right, well, I know the real goal isn't just to like take my yoga mat out. I know I actually want to do the workout. And if I know that, and it's like this mental trick, and I know it's a trick, why would I fall for it? And so my suggestion, if you feel that way, is force yourself for the first few days to only do it for 2 minutes.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, change your identity.
I forget which study it was, but it said something along the lines, it was a dietary study. If you said, I can't have that food, you were far more likely to eat it than if you said, I don't eat that food.
Yeah, I
right?
wrote
Because
about this one.
That's a decision, right? I think it was in Ferriss's 4-Hour Body.
Yeah, they brought people in. They did this. They had them do like some test that was just fake. It was just they thought that was the actual experiment, but of course, in psychology experiments, it's never the actual experiment. But anyway, as they walked out of the room, they offered them either a chocolate bar or some healthy snack, a granola bar or something. I don't know. Anyway, but during the test, they had to either repeat phrases or fill out phrases that were like, I don't eat ice cream, or I don't, miss workouts or things like that, or I won't, or I can't. I don't, or I can't. I can't eat ice cream. I can't work out. I can't miss a workout, that kind of thing. And all the people who said I can't, who felt restrictive, were far more likely to opt for the chocolate bar than the people who said I don't, which again comes back to this form of identity. Imagine, this is an example I mentioned in the book. Imagine you have 2 people who are trying to quit smoking and you offer both of them a cigarette. And the first person says, oh, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. And the second person says, oh, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. Same thing. They're both turning down the cigarette, but the first person still identifies as a smoker. They identify as someone who's trying to do something that isn't them. Whereas the other person signals this shift in identity. Oh, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. They no longer see themselves in that way. And it's one thing to say, I'm the type of person who wants this. It's another thing to say, I'm the type of person who is this. And in a sense, true behavior change is actually identity change. Because once you believe that that's who you are, you're not even really trying to change your habits anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person you already believe yourself to be. It's like, no, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. So I'm not like convincing myself to go to the gym. That's just who I am. I just work out, identity change is at the root of pretty much all behavior change.
Rule number 6, develop great habits.
Habits allow you to solve the problems of life with less energy and effort than you would otherwise need. And, all life requires energy to exist. If you don't have energy, then you don't survive. And so energy is very precious for that reason. And your brain is looking for ways to conserve it whenever possible. This makes just logical sense, right? Like if you imagine like our ancestors living on the savannah, if you could forage for berries in a patch that's 100 meters away, then why would you bother foraging for berries in a patch that's like 10,000 meters away or on the other side of the mountain or whatever, right? Like you're going to seek the path of least resistance to get the results that you want. And habits are sort of a shortcut, a mental shortcut that your brain uses to do that kind of thing on a daily basis. So take, for example, the habit of tying your shoe. The first time you do it, you don't know how to tie your shoe and you have to think carefully about how to make the knots and someone has to teach you how to do it and so on. But after you do it 100 times or 1,000 times or 10,000 times, pretty soon you can tie your shoes while you're talking to somebody or thinking about your to-do list for the day. You just pretty much can do it on autopilot. And so in a small sense, tying a shoe is like a problem that you face on a daily basis, and your brain has automated the solution. And habits allow you to do that in all different areas of life all the time. You automate the solutions to the recurring problems in life, which means you can focus on other things and direct your attention elsewhere. So for that reason, habits are like so central to our experience that we often overlook them. Like you don't even really think about brushing your teeth or tying your shoes or unplugging the toaster after each use or all these other things that you do each day. But your habits are the thing that help you function and operate in the world in a more efficient manner.
Rule number 7, design your environment.
You don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. You can decide to design something to make your good behaviors easier and your bad behaviors harder. So when it comes to habits, if you want to practice your guitar more frequently, put it right in the middle of your living room so you run across it all the time. If you want to read more, when you make your bed in the morning, take the book you want to read, put it on top of the pillow. When you come back that night, pick it up, read a few pages, go to sleep. For me, I used to buy apples all the time, and then I would put them in the crisper at the bottom of the fridge, and they would sit there for 3 weeks and go bad, and I'd finally open it up and see them again and get mad. And then eventually, I bought a bowl and put it right in the middle of the counter, and so then when I buy apples, I put them there, I see them every day, and now I eat them all the time. Many of our desires are simply shaped because we have an environment that shapes us in that way. So the moral of the story is I've never seen someone stick to positive habits in a consistent fashion in a negative environment. Maybe you can overpower it once or twice. Maybe you can have the willpower to do the right thing on one day. But if you're constantly fighting against those forces, it's going to be very hard to follow through.
Rule number 8, learn from failures.
There are some experiences in life that have to be lived to be understood fully. Not everything is like that, but some things do. And that's one thing that's challenging. I think about, there's a Naval Ravikant investor. He's got a quote where he says something to the effect of, good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions. So basically, you gotta kind of like try and fail, and then you learn, and that's how it happens.
It's all about lessons.
So part of that, I think, is unavoidable. That's just how it goes. Nobody is going to make perfect decisions throughout life, and hopefully, an unexamined failure only remains a failure. An examined failure can become a success. So hopefully, you're at least learning when you make the bad choices.
Rule number 9, build momentum.
One of the most effective feelings, one of the most motivating states is the feeling of progress.
Yeah.
And if you're focused on feeling guilty, blaming yourself for not improving, feeling like, oh, I'm not able to build better habits because something's wrong with me, that's not a very productive state to be in. Whereas if you shift it and say, all right, the problem is not me, the problem is the system. And if I'm going to change the system, then I can do X, Y, and Z. And we can talk about a variety of those strategies. But each time you do that, you take action and you build progress and momentum. And so I think it is a much more productive way to approach the process of change because it gives you something to actually work on. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the rest of these strategies, a lot of the time it's about stuff like, think positive or fake it till you make it or stuff like that. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Like certainly if you want to think positive, sounds better than thinking negatively. But my focus is much more on practical action steps. How can we make the process of behavior change actionable and give you something to do to design a system where you're more likely to succeed. And so I think that's just a better place to spend your time and energy.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is find a good coach.
Having a coach forces you to be aware of things that you would otherwise overlook, right? Like this is what I call the downside of building good habits, which is you build habits and in the beginning you develop fluency and skill and ability and things become easier. But after a little while, once a habit has been established, the downside of having a habit is that you can do it good enough on autopilot, which means that you start to overlook your mistakes and not think about how to get better. And so what you need is a coach to keep you on that razor's edge so that you keep building habits, but it also forces you to stay aware of what the next level of performance is. And that's kind of the challenge of continuous improvement. It's like a cycle. It starts with awareness. If you're not aware of what your habits are or what your behavior is, you don't have a chance to change it. Then from that awareness, you go to deliberate practice, where you have to effortfully try and work to get better. And eventually, the thing that you were deliberately practicing becomes a habit and becomes automatic. But once it becomes automatic, that's not the end. You have to return to awareness and see where you're at now and start the cycle again. One of the phrases I use, and I have this in the book, is that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. So it's like the same way that compound interest, accrues through finance, the effects of your habits multiply over time. And so often these choices that you make, they're these little 1% improvements for you or against you each day, and they're very easy to overlook on a daily basis, right? Like, what really is the difference between eating a burger and fries or a salad and chicken for lunch? You don't really see a whole lot.
Better.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It tastes amazing in the moment.
That's actually a crucial point that I cover in the book, which is that habits that are immediately satisfying are more likely to be repeated. And so pretty much any behavior produces multiple outcomes across time, right? Like if you eat a donut right now, it's tasty and sugary.
So good.
But in the long run, you gain weight. And so the immediate outcome is favorable. The long-term outcome is unfavorable. With good habits, it's often the reverse, right? Like you go to the gym right now, and it takes effort, you sweat, you have to work hard.
You have to sacrifice your time for Netflix and chill to go train.
The immediate outcome is unfavorable, but the ultimate outcome, you're in shape and in a year or a month or whatever, is favorable. And so the challenge for building good habits and breaking bad ones is often finding a way to pull the long-term consequences of your bad habits into the immediate moment, so you feel a little bit of the pain right now and want to avoid it, and the long-term rewards of your good habits into the immediate moment so that you have a reason to repeat it again in the future. Each behavior casts a vote for the type of person that you want to become. And if you cast enough votes for that type of identity, you start to believe that about yourself, right? Like if you go to church for 20 years, you believe that you're religious. You study Spanish every Tuesday for 30 minutes, you believe that you are studious. So in that way, your habits provide evidence of your desired identity. And I think that is probably the ultimate reason that habits are so important. It's true, like habits can help you earn more money or be more productive or lose weight, and all that stuff is great. But in addition to the external results that habits provide, they also shape your sense of self. They are the engine or the avenue through which you learn to believe things about yourself. Like sometimes people will say stuff like, fake it till you make it. But fake it till you make it is asking yourself to believe something without evidence for it. And you can do that for a little while. You could do it for a day or a week. But eventually, there's a word for beliefs that don't have evidence behind them. It's delusion, right? And if you're deluding yourself, then eventually you give up on that. But the power of doing a better habit each day or casting a little vote for that type of person is that now you have evidence to root your belief in.
Yeah, and so now I've done it for 6 months,
Right? Like, now you have a lot of evidence that you're a podcaster or a good interviewer. Like you do this over and over again. Each time you cast a vote for believing that about yourself. And you aren't delusionally believing that you're a good interviewer. It's because you've shown up and done it hundreds of times.
Right.
And so I think that that's true for any habit, large or small, that they provide evidence of the desired identity or the type of person that you are.
There's this professor at the University of Florida. He's retired now. He was a photography professor. His name's Jerry Ullsman. And at the beginning of the semester, he would have this film photography class, and he'd bring the class in, and he would split them into 2 groups. And he said, everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quantity of work that you do this semester. And everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quality of work that you do this semester. And he further explained it by saying that for your film photography, you're going to be responsible for having 100 pictures. If you do 100 photos over the course of the semester, that'll be an A. If you do 90, it'll be a B. If you do 80, it'll be a C, and so on. So it's quantity. For this group, you only have to produce 1 photo, but it has to be the most perfect photo that you can make. the best photo that you can make. An interesting thing happened. At the end of the term, all the best grades came from the quantity group, not from the quality group. And what ended up happening was that while people were busy experimenting, making mistakes, learning how to play with composition and so on, they would come across a really great photo. And while the quality group was busy theorizing about what perfection would look like and how to take the perfect photo and not actually honing their skills, they ended up only making something mediocre or average. And the important insight here, especially for habits, is that in the beginning, the most important thing is just to shut up and put your reps in. Just make sure that you hone the skill, right? And you can start to think of it, the way that I like to think of it is that any outcome that you wish to achieve is just a point along the spectrum of repetitions. So if you have few reps to more reps, and you can imagine an easy goal, a moderate goal, a hard goal, the more reps that you put in, the more likely you are to achieve that goal. So maybe point A is, let's take fitness, squatting 100 pounds. Point B is squatting 200. Point C is squatting 300. Maybe you need to put in 100 reps or 1,000 reps to get to point A. Maybe it's 5,000 to get to point B. Maybe it's 10,000 to get to point C.
Your brain is always developing habits. So it's happening whether you want it to happen or not. And the question is, can you take control of the process? And in a lot of ways, the fact that we have these mindless automatic behaviors, it's a pretty good system that evolution has designed. I mean, if you think about it from a very high level, as you go throughout life, you are facing problems. And some of those problems are big problems, and some of them are really small ones, like you need to tie your shoe. And your brain, whenever you come across a solution to the problem that you're facing, and you repeat it again and again, your brain starts to automate that. So, you tie your shoe once, and the first time it takes some effort and so on, but then you do it 50 or 100 or 200 times, and pretty soon you can tie your shoes while having a conversation or thinking about something else or whatever. And this is sort of the role that habits play in our lives, is that they are these mental shortcuts, these kind of automatic scripts that you can just play whenever the situation or the context is right. And they free up cognitive resources to focus your attention elsewhere. And so that's a really good system overall. We use it all day long without thinking about it. But occasionally it can serve us poorly because, so let's say you come home from work and you feel stressed and exhausted. And that's a problem that needs to have some kind of solution. So for one person, maybe they learn that if I play video games for an hour, I'm no longer stressed and exhausted. For another person, maybe learn if I smoke a cigarette, I reduce stress. For a third person, maybe it's meditating for 10 minutes. For a fourth person, maybe they run for a half hour. And the point here is that different solutions can solve the same recurring problems throughout life. And so your original habit is not necessarily the optimal habit for solving whatever the situations are that you come across in your life, the problems that you face day in and day out. And so if you can, it becomes more about designing a better solution to those problems. And that's where my focus is like, all right, we're building habits anyway. How can we develop better solutions to the recurring problems in our life? So occasionally, and this is true for everybody, if you live long enough, life will come for you at some point, right? Like something's going to happen. So occasionally life will stress you. But when life doesn't challenge you, I think it's important to challenge yourself, because otherwise you're just living in this optimal environment, air conditioning, and everything else is super easy. You can get all the information in the world at your fingertips. You never have to if you think about how crazy just eating is in the modern world. So previously, when we lived in tribes, you had to expend energy to get calories. At a minimum, you were foraging for berries, but otherwise you probably had to run something down and kill it, or part of a group hunt, or all kinds of other things. Now you can get calories without expending any. All you have to do is just tap Uber Eats on your phone or something, and it'll show up at your door, and you can just sit on the couch, which is, of course, a recipe for poor health, but also the game has completely changed now. We've transcended a lot of our evolutionary programming and natural situations. And so you need to be careful about designing that to serve you rather than to work against you, because it can very easily nudge you in the other direction. You can find examples of people who flip a switch and transform their lives, or have an epiphany and do it overnight. But I think that it's rare. Yeah. I think that the more sustainable strategy, the more reliable strategy, is to scale it down to the first 2 minutes, focus on that, establish it, master the art of showing up, and then go from there. So really you should usually when people think about building better habits, they optimize for the finish line, right? It's how much weight do I need to lose? How much money do I need to make? When can I finish this book?
It's all focused on the result. But I think instead, if you optimize for the starting line, make it as easy as possible to start, scale it down, organize your environment so that all that stuff is set up. This is another strategy for making it easy, which is that you can prime your environment to make the future action easier, right? Like if you chop up a bunch of vegetables and fruit on Sunday, it's now easier to have a healthy snack during the week. If you set your workout clothes out the night before, it's now easier to get into the workout the next day. But doing all that stuff to make it easy to show up, that is probably the more important piece early on.
So occasionally, and this is true for everybody, if you live long enough, life will come for you at some point, right? Like something's going to happen. So occasionally life will stress you. But when life doesn't challenge you, I think it's important to challenge yourself, because otherwise you're just living in this optimal environment, air conditioning, and everything else is super easy. You can get all the information in the world at your fingertips. You never have to if you think about how crazy just eating is in the modern world. So previously, when we lived in tribes, you had to expend energy to get calories. At a minimum, you were foraging for berries, but otherwise you probably had to run something down and kill it, or part of a group hunt, or all kinds of other things. Now you can get calories without expending any. All you have to do is just tap Uber Eats on your phone or something, and it'll show up at your door, and you can just sit on the couch, which is, of course, a recipe for poor health, but also the game has completely changed now. We've transcended a lot of our evolutionary programming and natural situations. And so you need to be careful about designing that to serve you rather than to work against you, because it can very easily nudge you in the other direction.
I think there are a few core habits that are going to serve everybody and certainly serve me well. So exercise is a huge one. I don't do it daily, but I train 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I didn't exercise, I don't know that I would be an entrepreneur. I don't know if I could handle the psychological roller coaster without the physical outlet.
Yeah, the release,
You probably feel that as an athlete too.
Gotcha.
For being an athlete for so many years, I feel like I need to push myself physically in addition to mentally.
Absolutely.
If it's just mental, it doesn't do it for me. I need to have a physical outlet.
So exercise.
Exercise is one. The ultimate meta habit is reading. Because if you build a habit of reading, you can solve pretty much any other problem. You want to learn how to be a better podcaster, you can read about that. You want to learn how to meditate, you can read about that. You want to learn how to make more money, you can read about that. And so what you need is to develop a habit of reading, and then whatever problem you're facing at the time, you have a method for solving that.
In order to change behavior, design it in any meaningful way, you need to be aware of it first. But usually when people become aware of their habits or think about them, you might smoke or bite your nails or something on autopilot. But then if you start to think about it, well, you feel guilty about it. You start to judge yourself. As soon as you start to judge yourself, then you're not in a great position to change, because what ends up happening a lot of the time, this has happened actually with a couple of campaigns that have tried to scare smokers into not smoking by showing them pictures of blackened lungs, or scare obese people into not eating as much by talking about the detriments of being overweight. What happens is people get really anxious and stressed. They feel guilty and worried, and then they resort to their preferred habit for dealing with that, which means they end up smoking more or eating more or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I think there is a benefit to looking at it in an unemotional, forensic way. Mm-hmm. And one way to do that is to say there are no good or bad habits. There are just behaviors that serve you in a particular way, and the goal is to try to find a behavior that serves you in a better way.
I think there are a few core habits that are going to serve everybody and certainly serve me well. So exercise is a huge one. I don't do it daily, but I train 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I didn't exercise, I don't know that I would be an entrepreneur. I don't know if I could handle the psychological roller coaster without the physical outlet.
Yeah, the release,
You probably feel that as an athlete too.
Gotcha.
For being an athlete for so many years, I feel like I need to push myself physically in addition to mentally.
Absolutely.
If it's just mental, it doesn't do it for me. I need to have a physical outlet.
So exercise.
Exercise is one. The ultimate meta habit is reading. Because if you build a habit of reading, you can solve pretty much any other problem. You want to learn how to be a better podcaster, you can read about that. You want to learn how to meditate, you can read about that. You want to learn how to make more money, you can read about that. And so what you need is to develop a habit of reading, and then whatever problem you're facing at the time, you have a method for solving that.
We interpret the stimuli and the data, the cues in our life differently based on what our viewpoint is at that time, based on what our personality or our personal viewpoint is, based on what you believe, your self-image. So I mean, you see this all the time with politics. You have the same news story that runs on the TV, but then a liberal and a conservative interpret that data in completely different ways. And it's because of what's getting echoed back to them, because of how they see themselves, because of what filter they're running that data through. And the same thing is true if we're talking about weight loss or whatever else. If like you see a particular number on the scale and the thing that's being echoed back to you is, I want to lose 20 pounds and feel great, then suddenly you don't feel good about that number. If the thing that's getting echoed back to you is, I've stuck to workouts for 7 days in a row and I feel more energetic and healthy, then you see the number in a totally different way. Same number, just different interpretation. So I think it's important, but it's not the whole story. And some of the things that also influence things are, like what we talked about, making things obvious and making them easy. But making it satisfying, which is the fourth kind of major lever that I talk about in the book, that's crucial for getting people to come back. And that can come in many different forms. So I guess I'll just lay the context for this real quick. This is really interesting to look at with a lot of products. So chewing gum is a good example. For many years, for hundreds of years, chewing gum was around, but it was like kind of this bland resin. It was just chewy, but it wasn't tasty. And Wrigley launched in like 1880, 1890, and they came out with juicy fruit and spearmint and double mint. And suddenly gum was chewy and it had this immediate flavor. There was like this immediate reward to chewing it. And it took off. They became the biggest chewing gum company in the world. And today, many companies are doing the same kind of thing where they're trying to layer in a little bit of extra satisfaction with the product. So a couple of years ago, BMW came out with a car that when you press on the accelerator, it'll pipe extra engine growl through the stereo in the car. So it's like more satisfying to step on the gas. Ford just came up with another one where the engine noise is still there, but they have this valve that it'll only open and let the engine noise into the car interior and past all the soundproofing if you really slam on the gas and rev the RPMs up. But if you just drive like normal, it'll keep it soft and quiet. And so the point there is that all of those products, cars or chewing gum and many others, they find ways to layer immediate satisfaction into the experience. And when you do that, people want to repeat it more. Anytime you have some kind of enjoyment or a satisfying ending to a behavior, it's like this positive signal in your brain that says, hey, that felt good. You should do this again next time. And that's what really gets a habit to stick. All the other stuff that we talked about, making habits attractive, making them more obvious, making it more convenient to do, that gets a habit to start the first time or makes it easier for you to do it right then. But the only reason you come back to it is because it's satisfying. And it's really about the speed of the satisfaction. And this is something that I call the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated, and behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And the more that you can have that positive emotional feeling right away, the more reason you have to come back to a habit in the future.
I'll give you an example of a good habit and a bad habit. So for good habits, you want the physical environment to make it obvious and easy for you to do the behavior. So like
like have a pull-up bar in your room.
Exactly.
If you're trying to do 100 pull-ups a day.
Right.
Like have it hanging over your door.
As opposed to even if you had one, but it was in the closet because you just half the time you wouldn't remember to take it out.
Or it's at the gym upstairs or down the street. No.
I have a friend who he wanted to practice guitar more, and so he left his guitar in the middle of his living room, and that just so he'd walk past it 100 times a day.
Pick it up and
becomes much easier, right? Bad habits are the same way. But in reverse, instead of making it obvious, you want to make it invisible. Take which is just talking about video games. A lot of people feel like they spend too much time watching TV or playing video games or watching a screen. But if you walk into pretty much any living room, where do all the couches and chairs face? They all face the television. So it's like, what is that room designed to get you to do?
Turn it on.
Yeah. So you can restructure that environment to make it less likely that you'll fall into that habit. And there are a variety of things you could do. You could take the remote control and put it inside like a drawer so you don't see it. You could put the television behind a wall unit or a cabinet so that it's less visible. But you could also increase the friction with the task. So you could unplug your TV after each use and only plug it back in if you can say the name of the show that you want to watch. So you can't mindlessly pull up Netflix and just find something. Or you could take the batteries out of the remote control so that it's an extra 5 to 10 seconds to turn on. Maybe that's enough time to be like, do I really want to watch something right now? Or am I just doing this mindlessly?
Yeah.
If you really wanted to be extreme,
don't have the TV.
Yes, you could get rid of the TV entirely or take it off the wall and put it in the closet and only take it out when you really want to watch something.
One of my favorite studies is about exercise. And they had 3 cohorts in this study. So they have first cohort, they said, I just want you to track how often you work out over the next few weeks, right? So that's the standard cohort, the control group. Second group, they said, we want you to track how often you exercise, but we're also gonna give you a motivational speech presentation, talk about the benefits of heart health, why habits are good for you, and so on. So this is the motivated group, right? The third group, they got the same presentation, so they were equally motivated, and then they did one thing differently. And that one thing was they filled out this sentence. They said, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this place, right? They specifically stated their intention to implement the behavior. So implementation intention. Here's what happened. First group, 1 out of 3 of them worked out. Second group, motivation did nothing. As soon as they left the researcher's facility the next day, they weren't motivated. It's like reading a book or watching a YouTube or listening to a motivational speaker, and then you forget all about it 20 minutes later. But the third group, the group that had a specific plan for how they were gonna implement the behavior, 9 out of 10 of them worked out. So you can increase your odds of success 2 to 3x just by having a specific plan. And this is the insight. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it, and so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how you want to implement the habit. It sounds easy to say, let's just start a plan, let's write down exactly what you should do, and then maybe you'll follow through on it. But of course, we all know that there are challenges that arise, it's not quite that easy. So here's a little strategy that I like to use to make sure you can come up with a better plan of action, and it's called a failure premortem. So the way that it works is you think about the habit, the project, the goal, whatever the most important thing is that you want to work on, and then I want you to imagine, fast forward 6 months from now, and you failed. And then tell the story of why you failed. What happened? What challenges did you encounter? What was it that took you off course? When I do this with businesses, sometimes we call it the kill the company exercise, because everybody just sits around and thinks about ways to kill the company in the next 6 months. And once you have all that stuff laid out on the table in front of you, you can start to make better choices about how to develop a plan. You can start to have if-then plans. So not only do I want to exercise for 20 minutes on Monday at 5 p.m., but also if I do not exercise because I have to take my kid to practice or whatever, then Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I will go in, right? You can have ways to adjust for these challenges. One of my favorite studies is about exercise. And they had 3 cohorts in this study. So they have first cohort, they said, I just want you to track how often you work out over the next few weeks, right? So that's the standard cohort, the control group. Second group, they said, we want you to track how often you exercise, but we're also gonna give you a motivational speech presentation, talk about the benefits of heart health, why habits are good for you, and so on. So this is the motivated group, right? The third group, they got the same presentation, so they were equally motivated, and then they did one thing differently. And that one thing was they filled out this sentence. They said, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this place, right? They specifically stated their intention to implement the behavior. So implementation intention. Here's what happened. First group, 1 out of 3 of them worked out. Second group, motivation did nothing. As soon as they left the researcher's facility the next day, they weren't motivated. It's like reading a book or watching a YouTube or listening to a motivational speaker, and then you forget all about it 20 minutes later. But the third group, the group that had a specific plan for how they were gonna implement the behavior, 9 out of 10 of them worked out. So you can increase your odds of success 2 to 3x just by having a specific plan. And this is the insight. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it, and so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how you want to implement the habit. It sounds easy to say, let's just start a plan, let's write down exactly what you should do, and then maybe you'll follow through on it. But of course, we all know that there are challenges that arise, it's not quite that easy. So here's a little strategy that I like to use to make sure you can come up with a better plan of action, and it's called a failure premortem. So the way that it works is you think about the habit, the project, the goal, whatever the most important thing is that you want to work on, and then I want you to imagine, fast forward 6 months from now, and you failed. And then tell the story of why you failed. What happened? What challenges did you encounter? What was it that took you off course? When I do this with businesses, sometimes we call it the kill the company exercise, because everybody just sits around and thinks about ways to kill the company in the next 6 months. And once you have all that stuff laid out on the table in front of you, you can start to make better choices about how to develop a plan. You can start to have if-then plans. So not only do I want to exercise for 20 minutes on Monday at 5 p.m., but also if I do not exercise because I have to take my kid to practice or whatever, then Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I will go in, right? You can have ways to adjust for these challenges.
If you were coaching someone who said, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do with my life, I'm lost, I have all these bad habits, I smoke, I drink, I eat donuts every day, I have no job, my room is sloppy, and I'm just depressed. What would you say to them to get started with changing their life around in the form of better habits?
Well, you just need to pick one thing, first of all. I think that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the most powerful forms of motivation is progress. So seeing some progress, I mean, it could be as simple as make your bed each day, right? But just doing that, embodying the identity of someone who's getting better, who's making progress, just pick one thing and use that as, this is true. I mean, Lewis, this is something you've probably seen with a lot of people that you've talked to, but habits are the foundation for mastery. So if you say take a sport like basketball, you need to be able to dribble with both hands without thinking before you can worry about what strategy you're running on offense or what kind of strategic play you're going to run or what your defensive scheme is or all this other stuff, right? Like you need to automate the fundamentals of the craft before you can worry about the next level of performance. Same thing is true for chess. Like you need to know how the chess pieces move automatically without thinking about it before you can get into, all right, what is my opponent going to do? And then I'm going to do this and they're going to do that. And so I think this is true not just at the peak levels of performance, that you integrate these habits and use habits as the foundation for the next level of performance, but also true when you're getting started. Just build one small thing, carve out a 1% change, a 1% improvement, and use that as a stepping stone to the next level.
Is there such thing as, I guess, central habits that can help to shift and transform other aspects of your life? Because that's something that I've noticed a little bit, where if I start eating better or if I start going to the gym every day, it's almost like a domino or ripple effect where these other habits start to pick up naturally because I'm starting to feel better. So, because I've been going to the gym 5 days a week. So now when I come home, I don't feel like binging out on junk food. I feel like eating better food. Or if I wake up early, is that something you've noticed in your research?
Yeah, sure. So there are two ways to answer this question. So the first way is what you're describing is sometimes called a keystone habit. And the idea is you do one thing and it like ripples into other areas of your life. And so for me, it's exercise. Like if I go to the gym, then I get the benefits of exercise, but I also tend to eat better. For some reason, I just don't want to waste it. I also focus more. So I have sort of that like post-workout high after I work out. And then I sleep better because I'm tired from the workout, which means I wake up the next morning and I have better energy. And at no point was I trying to build better sleep habits or energy habits or focus habits or nutrition habits, but all that kind of just came as a side effect of doing this one thing of going to the gym. Some other common keystone habits are budgeting. Sometimes people say when they pay off debt, they'll like start to get in shape, or they build, but they're more social and have better relationships, or like there's all kinds of things that kind of come out of that. Going for a daily walk is a really big one. It's a very common one among creators in particular. There's a book called Daily Rituals by Mason Curie. And he basically just writes down like what, I don't know, it's 100 or 150 famous like creators and scientists and whatever, what their daily routines were. And a lot of them were raging alcoholics and on amphetamines and all kinds of other stuff. But the ones who were more healthy, a daily habit like walking was a really big part of their routine. Visualization is a big one, especially for performers like a comedian or something. They'll often visualize the same kind of result, or professional athletes before they step out on the stage or step out on the court.
I think we actually have like 3 options for breaking bad habits. So the first option is to reduce exposure. So something like, if you want to stop spending so much money on electronics, then don't follow all the latest tech review blogs. Or if you want to lose weight, don't follow a bunch of food bloggers on Instagram. You're constantly being triggered by that and having to like overcome the prompts. Now, that doesn't always work, but if you can cut a habit off at the source, then a lot of the time, like the craving won't arise naturally. So in Atomic Habits in the book, I talk a little bit about this woman who she smoked while she was in college, and she would always smoke while riding horses with a friend. And so eventually at some point she quit smoking, and she's also stopped, like seeing that friend, and graduated from college and so on, wasn't riding horses. And then like 10 years later,
she got back on a horse for the first time and suddenly craved a cigarette. And she was like, what is going on here? And it's, your habits are often tied to a context. They're tied to a situation or some kind of cue. And so if you can reduce exposure to that cue, then in many cases, the craving won't arise. So that's the first option for breaking a bad habit. The second option, which kind of sucks, but is like to sit with the craving long enough to like let this wave of desire ride itself out. And so you basically just resist temptation. It's possible. It's easier if your hand is forced, if you use what I call a commitment device. So, brief story real quick. Victor Hugo, famous author who wrote like Hunchback of Notre Dame and a bunch of other things. Well, when he got the book deal for Hunchback of Notre Dame, he just procrastinated for like a year. He hosted a bunch of house parties, has friends over. He went traveling for a little while.
He was balling.
He got the book deal and he did nothing, no work. And eventually his publisher got pissed off. They were like, can you please like actually work on this? And so they set this ultimatum for him. And they said, we're gonna cancel the book in 6 months if you don't have it done by then. And so he got his assistant to come in, put all his clothes into a chest, and they locked him up and took him out of the house. And the only thing he was left with was like this shawl, this like large robe. So basically he had no clothes that were suitable for hosting guests or for leaving the house or like going on trips or anything else. So he more or less put himself on house arrest. And what ended up happening was each time procrastination arose, he was able to kind of sit with that feeling and let it ride because he didn't really have many other options, and then get back to work on the book. And it ended up working. He got the book done like 2 weeks early. But things like that where you can lock in your future action, and it becomes really hard to go to your friend's party or go out to, travel to a different place or whatever, just because you don't have the option. If you can increase the friction, then sometimes you can sit with the craving of a bad habit and let it ride out. So that's your second choice. And then the third choice is the one that you just mentioned, which is you take the solution that the bad habit is providing, the way that it's serving you, and you find a new behavior that delivers that same outcome. True behavior change is really identity change, because you're not really looking to go from the type of person who doesn't run to the type of person who can run a 5K. That's fine. That's good. It's the outcome. But the goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. Mm-hmm. The goal is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. And once you identify as that type of person, in a sense, you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person that you already believe that you are. Right. It's like one thing to say, I want this. It's something different to say, I am this. This is a real pitfall for a lot of people with habits, is they have this like all or nothing mentality. They'll like start this diet and then they go binge eat with their friends for, like happy hour or something. And then they're like, oh, well, I blew the diet. Guess I shouldn't even bother, right? And I think that this is a mantra that I like to keep in mind with habits. The truth is every habit streak is going to end at some point. Like when I launched my site, I wrote a new article every Monday and Thursday for 3 years. But then I signed this book deal and I needed to change that. And so that streak ended. And you've probably had a variety of times this year where you've done meditation for 5 days in a row or 7 days in a row or 12 days in a row. But then at some point that streak broke. And the key is never miss twice. Like if you can get back on track quickly, then that's a huge win. I've seen this in a lot of areas now as I've started to study people who are like top performers, whether it's sports or business, but it's not that they don't make mistakes. People at the top levels, they make mistakes too, but they just get back on track more quickly. So it's almost never the first mistake that ruins you. It's like the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. I think in the book I have a line something like, missing once is a mistake, missing twice is the start of a new habit. And what you don't want is to start that new habit. You want to never miss twice and just get back on track as quickly as possible. And if you can keep that in mind, it can end up being pretty powerful for consistency. It's like, even if you only did that, if you never missed twice, if you did it and then missed and they're like, well, I'm not going to miss twice. You did it again and then you missed, and then you do it at least 50% of the time. So anyway, yeah, I think that says something about your mentality that you keep coming back to it, even though every now and then it doesn't work out. In my personal life, like there's a moment around 5:15 each night. My wife gets home from work and either we change into our workout clothes and we go to the gym, or we don't change into our workout clothes and we watch, reruns of The Office and order takeout or whatever. And really the next 2 hours are kind of determined by that decisive moment of whether we change into our workout clothes or not. If we change clothes, then like everything else is going to happen automatically. We're going to drive to the gym. I'll get under the bar. It's already pre-decided basically. So One of the realizations of this, and it comes back to your kind of central question of what are the most important habits to build, or are there ones that ripple into other areas of life? If you can just master maybe 5 or 10 decisive moments throughout the day, these little kind of 2-minute chunks that determine the next block of time, you really only have to focus your attention and energy on that. And the rest of it kind of comes easily. You don't have to do that much if you can master the right moments. It's kind of like judo for your personal habits. You apply the pressure in the right place and everything else kind of falls in line.
Every behavior is followed by some kind of outcome. This is just basic cause and effect. And if the immediate outcome is favorable, is enjoyable, you have a reason to repeat it in the future. It's kind of like
donuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep
right.
repeating.
It's like that example. If you feel good, if you feel satisfied right after you do something, then it's like this positive emotional signal, and it's like, yeah, I should do this again.
Yeah.
So you can see this actually. Business is a really interesting example with this. There are a lot of products, and some of the most successful products have some type of immediate satisfaction that is layered into them. So toothpaste is a very common example. There's no reason a toothpaste needs to taste like mint, but it does, because the minty flavor and the refreshingness of it it gives your mouth this clean feel. Mm-hmm. It's more satisfying, so you have a reason to do it again in the future. I heard an interesting one recently about car manufacturers, that some of them are adding a fake guttural roar to the car or the truck when you press the accelerator, because it just adds to the actual natural sound of the engine, so it makes it more satisfying to step on the gas and to drive the car. So there are a variety of examples like this, but if you can add, the key is it needs to be immediate, right? So like this is, in the book I refer to this as the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated, behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And it's really about the speed of how quickly you feel successful. If it feels good, you have a reason to do it again.
Is that why video games do so well?
Video games are masters at this. They're masters at it. So they're masters actually at a variety of aspects related to habit formation. So one is they're really good at this immediate satisfaction. There are all kinds of things. You're actually constantly getting feedback in a video game. Even if you're just running, you hear the pitter-patter of the steps. That's
gratifying.
Feedback. The jingles of like picking up another power-up or seeing a kill or something like that. Whatever the game is, you're always getting constant feedback. Sound, things that are on screen, they're really good at dripping out. Watching the score increase in the top corner, that is immediate feedback. So they have all these different ways of making you feel satisfied. And when you see that progress, you have a reason to continue in the future. This is one of the most effective forms of immediate satisfaction is progress. As soon as you feel progress, you have a reason to continue. It feels really good to see that you're making headway.
If your expectations are sky high, like if you set, I have a friend who's a writer, and his goal is to write one sentence every day. And it sounds absurd, but if you set the expectation that low, then he can feel successful pretty much every day. He always can feel satisfied by sticking to the habit, which gives him a reason to come back again the next day. And sometimes he writes a full page, and sometimes it's just a sentence. But if he had set a goal of writing 1,000 words a day, there would be some days where he couldn't do that. And then suddenly he's feeling bad about that. Like, what if he wrote one sentence that day? He would feel bad about it, even though he still wrote that day, but it's just because of his expectation. So there's a little bit of like mental play that's going on there in how we sabotage ourselves by setting the bar so high. That's especially true in the beginning. I think that it becomes less true for maybe the 1 or 2 areas where you really want to be a master in life. Like if something's really important to you and you want peak performance, you want to be a professional athlete, you want to be, among the best authors or something like that, then maybe your strategy needs to change. But for most people, most of the time, the strategy is probably better to set the bar low, find a way to be satisfied and show up each day. And then once you've built the habit, then you optimize from there. This is, I had a reader who ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the things that he did was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. And so it sounds so weird because it's a complete opposite of what most people do to build a habit. But what he was doing was he was mastering the art of showing up. And so for 6 weeks, he went to the gym, he'd go in, do like half an exercise, and then 5 minutes would be up and he'd go home. And eventually he got to the point where he was like, I'm coming here all the time. I kind of feel like staying longer, right? But that's the opposite of the person who takes the intermediate CrossFit class and like kills themselves for 3 weeks and then it feels totally fried and, gives up. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, I got to get back in shape. And so a habit must be established before it can be improved, right? Often we optimize for the finish line. We think about the outcome that we want. We think about like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to earn 6 figures this year, or whatever the thing is. But instead, if you just focus on the first 2 minutes of a behavior, or in this guy's case, the first 5 minutes of the behavior, and you optimize for the starting line, you master the art of showing up, but then you have options. Then you actually have something that you can improve. If you're not the type of person who shows up at the gym, even if it's just for 5 minutes, it doesn't even matter what your ideal workout plan is or whatever. Like, you can't do anything because you're not there. And so in that sense, I think that it's often helpful for people, especially in the beginning, to scale a habit down to the first 2 minutes, master the art of showing up, and then once you're the type of person who does it every day, figure out a way to improve.
How much willpower do we have?
So you hear this a lot. I mean, it's very common, especially in self-help, motivation, self-improvement. Yep. You need to be motivated. You have to have willpower. Grit and perseverance are huge and important. And it's not that those qualities are not important. It's just that the way to develop them is different than what most people think. So most people think, I need willpower, so I should just try harder. There's an interesting body of research, I mentioned it in the book, I think it's in chapter 7, on self-control and willpower, which is that the people who appear to have the greatest self-control actually are just tempted the least. So they face temptations less frequently and therefore have the reserves and the resources to resist it when it occasionally comes up. And I think that this is actually like the lever to pull, or the pressure point to push on, is that the way to get better willpower is to design an environment that tempts you less, not to say, let me just try harder.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you're different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from James Clear, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Let's say that you wanted to build a better. I'll give you an example of breaking a good or building a good habit and breaking a bad one. So one of the laws is to make it obvious, and this largely comes down to like what we're exposed to each day. And minimalism